好，谢谢。Hello, and welcome to GTV UK News. This is Dr. Ming from London. Today is Wednesday, 24th March 2021. While the world media was attracted to the Alaska meeting last week, none questioned why the COVID-19 pandemic was not even a part of the agenda of the American side. Reporting the Chinese Communist Party CCP's wolf warrior diplomacy, few probed why it adopted this approach. These and other questions deserve more attention so as to defend the interests of the American, Chinese, and other ordinary peoples, as well as to hold the CCP accountable for the unprecedented catastrophe it has caused worldwide. We, the GTV UK team, invite Mr. Stephen K. Bannon to lend his wisdom to shed light on these issues. As his allies and friends, we are also concerned about his personal well-being and thus inquire about the dismissal of his indictment. Hello, Mr. Bannon.
Hi, how are you doing? Good to see you.
Very well. Yeah, very well, thank you. Glad to see you again. So let's begin. The first question is from me. The issue of COVID-19 was off the board of the Alaska meeting between the top American and the CCP diplomats. Meanwhile, JP Morgan agreed to pay $410 million for 10% stake in a leading Chinese wealth management business. Do you think the two governments have made some dirty deal at the expense of the American and Chinese people's interests? Thank you.
I think Alaska was a total and complete disgrace for the Biden administration and the American people. You remember, let's go back in time. I mean, we talked about this last week of what we were anticipating is going to happen. But Tony Blinken, remember, Tony Blinken is nothing more than a clerk. He's not powerful at all, just a clerk. He's part of the Biden's corruption at the University of Pennsylvania in raising money for the Biden Center, which they still have not disclosed whether they have CCP money in the Biden Center up there. So this is absolutely just a total disgrace. He opened with a 2-minute, very weak opening, of which he never mentioned the CCP virus, never mentioned the Wuhan lab, never mentioned the destruction that the Chinese Communist Party have wreaked upon Hubei province, Wuhan, the Chinese people, the diaspora of the Chinese people throughout the world, and of course, all mankind. Didn't even mention it. And Tiger Yang, who's as corrupt and evil as anybody on earth. I mean, he's at the same level of Wan Shan and Xi for their corruption. He immediately blasted back with a 20-minute diatribe, which tried to put the Americans on their back foot, and quite frankly used a lot of language of the American elite that says the country's systemically racist. So it was a disgrace. The entire effort, Joe Biden, and I said this in War Room, he should have recalled Tony Blinken and the messenger boy, Jake Sullivan, immediately back to the United States. There should have never been a second day of this. And quite frankly, Blinken should have said, he should have stood up right then, read Tiger Yan, the riot act, and left himself. So it was an embarrassment, and it's going to cause major problems. We've already seen this week with the Russia-China meeting already, with the arrogance of this. So it's a disgrace, and it's you can't defend it.
Okay. Next question is from Daniel. Daniel, please. Daniel.
Yes, thank you. Comparing the show of the CCP diplomats versus its American counterparts in Alaska as a sheep in wolf skin versus a wolf in sheepskin, Miles Gore remarked that the bilateral diplomacy mirrored the top-level CCP's power struggle. Do you agree, Mr. Bannon? Thank you.
I always defer to Miles. I think Miles has a fantastic understanding of the inner workings of that apparatus, and he's been the number one whistleblower and really has been right on so many topics. So I always defer to Miles, given his track record, whether it's H&A, Hong Kong, the CCP virus, I always defer to him for his judgments, because I'm certainly, as an American, not an expert in that. What I will tell you, though, is I think that they laid out in front of the world, and I think this is quite interesting, and I think this is the power of G News and GTV in all of the whistleblower movement, and particularly the new federal state of China, and the way it's getting traction, and people are starting to look at it as an alternative model for governance of the Chinese people. I think there's great fear, particularly the internal financial records. You know, the companies over there are having some of the worst quarters they've ever had. Some of the numbers are being reported. Remember, the CCP lies about every number, whether it's the research for a vaccine or if it's a company's reporting numbers. They always lie. They always mislead. That being said, we know that the economy is having a real struggle. I think what you're seeing is a more aggressive focus and front porch, whether that's I consider them a wolf in wolf's clothing, right? Going forward and try to be so expansionist, so dictatorial, so in your face on an international level. It takes away and try to build up ultranationalism, particularly among the universities and the university students back in mainland China, because of the poor performance of the economy and because of the oppression, the continual increased oppression of the Chinese people through social media and other aspects. I think it's a sign of their weakness, but I think now we're entering a zone where it's going to be more and more dangerous. But as far as the factions fighting each other and, you know, and what's the different policies coming out of these different factions, I always defer to Miles. And quite frankly, I defer to Miles because I tell people, look at his track record of telling people, whether it's about Hong Kong, whether it's about H&A, whether it's about the virus, CCP virus, whether it's about the corruption and the money laundering and the influence peddling. He's had an unparalleled, I think, track record.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon. Next, Dr. KCC, please.
Hi, Mr. Bannon. On Monday, the U.S. and Canada joined the EU and the UK in sanctioning the CCP's official entity responsible for human rights abuses in Xinjiang. How helpful is such a coordinated move to deter the CCP's atrocities? Thank you.
It's a good move. It is. It shows coordination. It shows the allies of something they're not going to stand against, what they're going to stand against. I just don't think it's enough. You know, yesterday in the Russia-China summit, the meeting they're having with Lavrov, they actually brought up about going to the United Nations to talk about the U.S.'s divisive policies, and I think they particularly mentioned coming into the internal policies of China, particularly of the Uyghurs, and designating the regime as genocidal. I would welcome that. I think we do need to go to the Security Council. I think we need to have a full vetting and force the Russians and the Chinese to veto things. I think this has to be elevated. So I think what you're talking about is very good and very powerful. And I'm always for concerted effort, whether it's from the Quad, India, Japan, Australia, and the United States, or if it's from the EU or NATO, etc. Of free-minded people that are looking to support the freedom of the Chinese people of Lao Beijing. I think everything's to be complimented. I just don't think it's enough. And I think that happening on Monday, Doctor, when you had what happened in Alaska on Thursday and Friday, to me is an off balance. And I realized that, you know, Tony Blinken sits there in his introductory remarks. Remember, he goes, you know, we've got to maintain the post-war international rules-based order, right? That's it. It's kind of this alliance systems and capital market systems and commercial and trade deals and American military guarantee post-World War II. Well, here's the problem. For the last 30 or 40 years, the Party of Davos in Brussels, really the World Economic Forum and this entire apparatus that is the way that the world's economy works, coupled with the United States elites and the City of London and Wall Street and NATO, all of it, allowed the Chinese Communist Party to game the system. And here's the central problem we have. As they gamed the rules-based international order system, and there was really a feckless response to respond to that, except when Donald Trump came to power, and quite frankly, I was a part of that. You've had no pushback, and so going back to the rules-based international order, and depending upon that's not a solution. The Chinese Communist Party's already gamed that system. At the same time, gamed that system and really had not a glove laid on them for the oppression of the Chinese people. Lao Beijing's had the boot on the neck forever since they came to power in 1949, but specifically over the last 20 or 30 years, whether it's the Tibetan Buddhists and the Dalai Lama, the Uyghurs, the underground house Christians, the Catholics, Falun Gong, are just basic Chinese citizens that maybe don't have any religious affiliation at all because of the firewall. So to me, it's ridiculous. And here's what the world, the people of the world know it's ridiculous. And the Chinese Communist Party knows it's ridiculous. That's just a talking I give. So yes, I do support any efforts that are being made. I don't think these are enough. And I still don't think they're sanctioning the right people. I think they got to sanction Tiger Yang. They got to sanction Wan Qishan. And they got to sanction Xi and all their families' holdings in the various parts of the world.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question from Daniel, please. Daniel.
The CCP's Global Times editorial commented that Xi's China and Putin's Russia are strategic partners, that the bilateral cooperation has no upper limits. What does such a defined Sino-Russian relationship imply to the U.S. and its allies? Mr. Bannon, please.
Look, I've said for a long time is that the Chinese Communist Party's focus is on, first is the consolidation of the Eurasian landmass. And they will do that with their allies in Pakistan, the mullahs in Iran, Turkey, and eventually Russia, unless the West makes some concerted effort to pull Russia into our orbit. And, because of the Russian investigation, all the elites who hate Putin and really despise the Russian people, particularly since it's not the Soviet Union, but it's become less atheistic, more Christian in its beliefs. Obviously, it has a deep history of Christianity, Orthodox Christianity, and also nationalism. The globalist elites hate that. And so they have pushed Russia into China's camp here. And look, I don't have any misconceptions of the Russian leadership. I spent my youth, from the time I was in my early 20s until my entire decade of the 20s for me was either on a Navy destroyer in the South China Sea, right, patrolling the South China Sea for Russian submarines, not Chinese Russian submarines, right, and also in the Persian Gulf and North Arabian Sea. So I don't need to be told how evil aspects of Russia and the Soviet Union leadership are, not the people, but the leadership. But we've forced ourselves into a terrible situation, and that now two entities who are two kind of gangster. Remember, the Chinese Communist Party is a transnational criminal organization. It is not a legitimate government. And why can I say that? Well, first off, they've lied about everything they've said. So they were going to come to power in 1949. Land redistribution, ownership of the means of production for the Chinese people. Remember, the 1.4 billion Chinese people, only 90 million are Communist Party, and only a couple thousand make any difference. And of that, only a handful of the families take all the wealth. And so the perfect example of why they're a transnational criminal organization is you brave people in the whistleblower movement in the new federal state, and Dr. Ming and all of you that put on this show every week. Look at the talent here, and you're not living in your homeland. Why? Because you want freedom. You don't want oppression, and you won't put up with it. The biggest, and this is why the Chinese Communist Party gets more and more desperate, whether it's Hong Kong, Taiwan, or to hunt down all of the whistleblowers, all the new federal state, all the free Chinese in the Western democracies who are thriving. Why are they thriving? They're thriving because if you allow the Chinese people to have rule of law, if you allow the Chinese people to have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom to redress your grievances, the Chinese people flourish. That's why they flourish in the West so much, because they actually have freedom. And this is the problem. Now we have essentially the transnational criminal organization in Beijing, and now we have forced into their hands the worst elements in the Russian leadership to work in partnership. And that is only going to bring, along with the mullahs in Iran, along with Erdogan in Turkey, along with the guys in Pakistan in their vassal state of North Korea and the other vassal state they're trying to get in Venezuela. You look at these situations, and it's going to be bad. And this is all unforced errors of the elites in the West, and that Joe Biden is playing right into the hand of this. So that summit, and remember, the Chinese Communist Party doesn't do anything they don't think through. They go to Alaska, and then immediately they have the summit in Russia, and the summit in Russia was pre-planned. And today, they're talking about getting off the dollar as a reserve currency. They want to get off the SWIFT system, so you can't monitor their financial transactions. And they're actually calling today for a UN, I think, Security Council meeting to address the divisive nature of American foreign policy with its allies. So this thing's building to a head. Remember, in the Russia summit, the most important thing they've said the last couple of days is that they want to get off the dollar as the reserve currency, because, as you know, this is the great piece of leverage we have over the Chinese Communist Party, is that they need the capital of the West, and particularly they need the access to the currency of the West, because their currency is meaningless, right? Nobody would, in their right mind, would take the Chinese currency, because the Central Bank of China reports directly to the Chinese Communist Party, and people know they're gangsters, so they could change anything they want about the exchange rate to print more money or do anything. The fact that nobody takes the currency seriously on an international basis says everything you need to know about what the world thinks of the Chinese Communist Party. Nobody would ever convert their situation into the RMB. It's ridiculous. Nobody trusts the CCP, right? Not even their allies. But they want to get off the U.S. dollar. They want to get off the U.S. dollars backed by the full faith and credit, not just the U.S. government, but the American people. So we're in very difficult times here, and the forecast is getting cloudier and cloudier as you go every day. And here's the point: the feckless leadership or lack of leadership by the Biden administration, just as I warned, right, is enticing and empowering the most reckless elements, the most aggressive elements of the Chinese Communist Party. So when Miles talks about these faction fighting, I think that you're empowering the most dangerous elements in the Chinese Communist Party, not the reformers, not that you could ever reform it, but even people that want to be moderates and reform it, I think are being brushed aside, because now they see the benefits of it, particularly with a bad internal economy, of going full wolf diplomacy right now. So I think we're headed into very, very, very dangerous times here, brought on by the West. This is like, as I keep saying, very analogous to the 1930s. Very analogous to the 1930s.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bannon. I think, okay, next question from Castle. Castle, you have a question about Mr. Trump, yeah? Would you please ask that question? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Trump reportedly will be back on social media in 2 or 3 months with his own service. Will this be another type of game?
I don't know. I do know that there's a lot of alternatives to Twitter and Facebook, et cetera, popping up every day, whether that's Rumble, Telegram, Gab. Mike Lindell's going to announce a big social media platform. I'm sure President Trump's being pitched by a lot of people. He's clearly a game changer on social media. So we'll just have to see. I don't know. There have been, Parler has had some problems. Parler's particularly had some technical problems about how the user interface works. So, it's in capitalism, innovation is key. I think you're seeing a lot of innovation right now. The Miles Grow has built, the reason that that G News and GTV, the content that Miles provides in his role as kind of the spokesman for the networks, but the hard work you guys are doing in all the aspects of social media, you can build a global TV network with grit and determination and smarts when it comes to these technologies. So I think on the right, and I think particularly in the Trump movement, you're seeing innovation every day, whether it's at Rumble, whether it's at Gab, whether it's at Mike Lindell's new service. And I think you're going to see a Clout Hub, right? Clout Hub's done a great job. So I think you're going to see that whatever one President Trump partners with, or whatever one he comes up with himself, it seems like they're working on something. I'm sure it'll be another great addition, but it won't be exclusive. I think you're going to have a half a dozen of these that start to come up and start to rival and take a lot of the traffic away from the more established oligarchs in Silicon Valley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bannon. Daniel, would you please ask your question? Hello, Daniel.
Yes, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, I can. That's fine.
Your lawyer reportedly has asked the federal judge to dismiss your indictment after President Trump's pardon. Could you share with us more details, please, Mr. Bannon?
It's just a technical aspect. I got a pardon. This whole thing was political in the first place. It was to make sure they kept me off the campaign, which I wasn't going back to. But if you look at the crisis on the border right now, and we have a massive southern border crisis brought on by the radical policies of Joe Biden. It just reinforces everything we said and everything we did in building the wall, of which we're going to get back into because we have to. Remember, the building the wall part was just symbolic because you're not going to take, you need $22 billion, according to President Trump's estimate. And he got like $1.5 billion, I think $1.7 billion from actually the U.S. Treasury, from the government, the appropriations process to build it. We were only going to build a couple of miles of it, but do it in places that were the most important to stop cartels from coming across. The one in El Paso, to show you how important our wall was. The one that when the Republican leadership, McCarthy and those guys went down last week for the photo op, they had that photo op, that was standing in front of the wall that we built in El Paso, Texas. It's still, and this is and why did they go there? Border Patrol said it's the best wall that was built the entire time. And in the most important location, or one of the most important locations. We built that right at the side of a mountain in El Paso, Texas, because the Border Patrol said, hey, this is where the cartels are they're doing all the human trafficking of young women, of women and girls. And so that's why we went to where the Border Patrol told us to go. So I'm incredibly proud of everything that we did. Also, we started the whole concept of every town a border town. Remember, in the United States, it's not just the Rio Grande Valley in southern Arizona and New Mexico. Because the cartels come, and what the Biden administration is doing is flying these illegal aliens all over the nation, putting them in places like Montana and Wyoming and Idaho. Every town in the United States is a border town. El Chapo, the cartel head who's in business with the CCP. Remember, the CCP is an active partner with the cartels to force fentanyl and opiates into the country, right? So they're an open partner. He was deemed Chapo, he was the cartel leader. El Chapo was designated public enemy #1 in Chicago because of the cartel and the drug traffic there. The first public enemy #1 since 1929 in Al Capone. So no. So the other thing was just a technical thing my lawyer put up that with the pardon it should have been totally dropped. I stay out of all that legal aspects. I've got too much I'm doing on War Room and other activities to basically confront the CCP. So I don't have time to worry about that. But I got a great team of lawyers, and they take care of all that. But it's, as you can tell, it hasn't slowed me down 1 second or 1 step, even from when I was indicted back in August. It's a total sham. People know it's a sham. It's a joke. And but I don't pay any attention to it. Never talk about it. I just focus on my work, which is my calling, to be, to drive the populist movement in the United States, the populist nationalist movement here and throughout the rest of the world, and one day to ultimately bring populism to China and to assist Lao Beijing and the Chinese people in their freedom. So I've got my plate full, and I don't have time to worry about that. But my lawyers take care of it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bannon. Counsel, you have a question about what Mr. Craig Fowler says. Okay, would you please ask that question?
Yes, Craig Fowler, the commander of U.S. forces in Central and South America, warned that the CCP's front line for aggressively achieving global dominance is much closer to home. Specifically, what CCP activities in the U.S. southern backyard are alarming.
Yeah, I think Admiral Fuller, remember there's 3 types of warfare. There's information and cyber warfare, there's economic warfare, and there's kinetic warfare. As outlined in the book, the great book, Unrestricted Warfare, that was put out by 2 Chinese colonels in the PLA back in the late 1990s, which is really the roadmap for the Chinese Communist Party in their global plan for world hegemony. The military aspect of this is very concerning. Admiral Fuller and others are starting to bring that up. We have 3 very dangerous situations in Taiwan, number one, in the South China Sea, number two, and on the border of India and China. They're all hot spots. They're very dangerous. Remember, the debt that the American people have taken up, the bonds that are held by the CCP, the interest payments alone, we're paying for, the American people are paying for the Chinese military. So it's a very dangerous situation. Now you're having flag officers present that to Congress, things we've been saying for years. Now, this is once again where Steve Bannon's right and the elites are wrong. I warned back in, I think, 2015 or early 16, when the CCP stopped sending rare earths and strategic metals to Japan. They were going to cut them off because of an incident in the East China Sea regarding islands and fishing vessels, that the CCP said, hey, we're going to stop sending you rare earths, which are central to the manufacturing process of high technology companies. I said back then, unless the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, this gangster regime in Beijing is confronted, right, in defense of the Chinese people, if we don't do that in the West, this isn't 15. I said within 5 to 8 years, we're going to be in a shooting war in the South China Sea, a body of water that, as a young man, I sailed on a Navy destroyer to keep free navigation for all the peoples of Asia. And I stand by that prediction today, that unless we take a firm stance, and I think Fuller and other people are trying to raise that up into people's conscious, that we, the West, have to really start to look at the kinetic, they're basically the war-fighting capabilities of the PLA, which have vastly improved over the last 20 years.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon. Next question is from Dr. TCC. Dr. TCC, please.
Hi, Mr. Bannon. So the Morrison government has passed legislation to further strengthen protections for freedom of expression and academic studies in Australia universities. Do you think such a legislation is necessary in a Western democracy nowadays?
Unfortunately, I think it is. I mean, it's what Australia is doing, and Morrison, I think, has been very impressive about what he's doing. So yes, I think it's something that's got to be considered across the board. At least has to be considered. And I want to say, in addition, I'm really proud of the fact that when you took at the Quad, you look at the conference that happened last week of the leaders prior to the summit in Alaska. I don't think it was enough, just like I don't think what's happening in Europe, the sanctions, enough, but I think it's a good start. And to show India and Japan and Australia and in the United States, and particularly what I'm most impressed with is the citizens living in those countries, the Chinese diaspora that has supported that. I think is very powerful. So I'm very supportive of what's going on in Australia. Unfortunately, I've got a boot because I get ready to show. But Dr. Ming, and for the team, what I really want you to think about, and I would like to come back to you guys today or tomorrow, I want to put on a summit, like a 2-hour summit, co-sponsored with Warm and you guys, that really goes through and summarize what's happened over the last couple of weeks and going forward, because I think we're at a historic moment right now. And I think and I think we need your guys' voices too in a summit that I host. I'm so impressed with what I see on GTV and G News every day that I think that we got to work together and have some sort of summit where we're inviting the world in some sort of organized 2-hour with some speakers, some panels, some topics that are deconstructed. So I've got to go. I love my Wednesday here because it's the best questions. You have the best team in all media. Not just with regard to the CCP, this is the best team in all media, and I'm honored to be part of it and very thankful for my Wednesday interview with you guys.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Bannon. We will try our best, all right? Okay, we will collaborate and we will cooperate to get this summit a success. Okay.
Thank you, team. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
See you soon. It's an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much, guys, and well done. So thank you all our audience for joining us, and please stay tuned, and we'll come back as soon as possible. Okay. Have a nice day.